I'd like to call to order the regular council meeting for the afternoon of Tuesday, August 8th. This meeting is being recorded live and is streaming on the District of Summerland YouTube channel. All representations to council, written or verbal, will form part of the public record and be available to the public for viewing electronically or as a written record. And corporate officer, any late items? No late items. Get approval of the agenda. Councillor Van Elfen, Councillor Betts, all in favor. That carries. Consent agenda. Would anybody like to remove anything from the consent agenda? We have some minutes, correspondence. No, if someone could bring forward a motion to approve the consent agenda. Councillor Peak, Councillor Betts, all in favor. That carries. We have two delegations today. First, I'd like to ask Vic Jensen to come up for the Trail of the Okanagan Society.
Your Worship, Dennis,
okay. Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, just have a seat, press the button so the light comes on. Just the, yeah. So red light, there you go.
Perfect.
Perfect.
Okay, and I advance it with this, I'm assuming? Perfect. Okay, thank you. So first, thank you.
Oops,
Council.
sorry.
That wasn't me? Okay. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for this opportunity to speak to you today. My name, as Vic said, is Janice Levy, and I'm the current president of the Trail of the Okanagan Society. I have with me here three residents of Summerland who are on our board: Vic Jensen, Mary Trainer, and Don Gamel. It's interesting that most of the we have a large contingent from Summerland on our board because the group was started in Summerland. So thank you for that too. Trail of the Okanagans is a voluntary advocacy group with a vision of connecting trails across the Okanagan to create a 250-kilometer trail running from Sicamous down to Osoyoos, with a further 125 kilometers that would take it down to Brewster, Washington, with groups that are working down there. It follows roughly a 6,000-year-old First Nations trail, which is important to understand why our name is Trail of the Okanagans. It's trail singular, and the Okanagans refers to the Okanagan peoples. I want to mention that this is our new logo that we just unveiled a few months ago. It was designed by a very young 13-year-old Silk young woman from the West Bank First Nations, and we have left you some cards that explain the connection between the salmon and the trail that they have defined, because we really wanted to indigenize our work and start a meaningful engagement with First Nations for the development of the trail, given our name and the history that we're evoking. Am I pushing the wrong one? Oh, sorry. There we go. So where is the trail? Our group is focused on the 125 kilometers that run between West Kelowna and Osoyoos. As you know, there are other groups working north of us with the Okanagan Rail Trail and the Sicamous, sorry, the North, I forgot the name, the one that runs north from Sicamous, south from Sicamous down to Armstrong. In the South Okanagan, about 75% of the trail currently exists in some form. Our vision intends for that trail to be multi-use, very similar to the Okanagan Rail Trail for non-motorized use for hiking, horse riding, cycling, including e-bikes, and built to a AAA standard, which means all ages and ability standard. And of course, it will ultimately connect to the trails north of us to create that full 250 kilometers of trail. So we've designed our board to have members from each community from West Kelowna down to Osoyoos, including from the Penticton Indian Band. One of the biggest wins we've had in the last while is to have one of the PIB councillors, Tim Lazard, join our board last October, and that's been a huge step forward for our group in being able to communicate with the PIB and other groups as well. We also, our work includes not only advocacy specifically with each of the communities like we're doing today, but we have been writing successful grants for communities, such as in Peachland. We helped the district write grants for active transportation network plans and also raising funds for trails in various communities. You can see some of the examples here. One of the projects that we're very excited about, we're hoping to start construction on a connection trail between Peachland and West Kelowna next spring. We're waiting for final approval on the funding that we've applied for, but we're very positive that that's going to happen. But we're here today because Trail of the Okanagan's was named as a catalyst project in the District of Summerland Downtown Neighborhood Action Plan. So that's what we'd like to specifically talk to you today about. It's interesting that the plan identifies the concept that connectivity is very important in defining downtown Summerland as a hub of the community. And part of that is through the connectivity. So the reason the Trail of the Okanagans is identified in the plan as a catalyst project because it does exactly that. It starts to create a trail that allows various neighborhoods within Summerland to come to downtown and through downtown on a singular pathway. It'll also connect to other pathways that the district is envisioning, I believe, down Jubilee and down to the southern part of town. We're obviously focused on the spine, as we call it. And we would also like to note that that spine that you're currently looking at would also connect you ultimately down to Penticton and to Peachland. So it's not just for your community. It allows your community to move to other communities and allows the tourists to come here by bike. So the trail, as I mentioned, I think you can see on this plan to the north, it comes up the Fur Brigade Trail from Peachland and then down Garnet Valley Road and onto Quinpool as it arrives at downtown. And south of that, it takes advantage of I want to say thank you for the expansion of the Giant's Head pathway. That's a fabulous addition to this community. That would move south and then eventually get you to the trestle. And we're hoping someday that there will be a discussion with the PIB about the use of the KVR, but that's in the future. But specifically downtown, I want to say that our group, we don't just define these plans, we look at all of the existing planning documentation that you have provided. We're nimble if something comes up or as a suggestion for a better route by communities, we follow that advice. We've recently had a meeting with planning staff at the District of Summerland, and they came up with some adjustments to some of our ideas and which we've accepted. So the idea would be coming down from Garnet Valley Road, turning onto Quinpool, turning south on Dixon, which we understand may have some upgrades coming to it because of some adjacent development, turning onto Jubilee, where you've started to build some of that infrastructure today and extending that, then turning down onto Kelly, which would take you past the school and the park and directly to downtown, and then ultimately on Wharton and connecting to Prairie Valley and getting you onto Giant's Head. I know that there has been some community commentary saying, why are you building this bike lane on Jubilee that goes nowhere? It's very easy to criticize something in the first step. You have to see the bigger plan. And we'd say there's no point in building a block of bike lane because people want to go from somewhere to somewhere. So you have to envision the entire spine and take the opportunities when you can to do that. So we have 3 requests today. The first one is respectfully to amend the District of Summerland Cycling Master Plan to include the Trail of the Okanagans route as we've outlined it today and have discussed with your planning staff. It's very important. It's essential to have the route defined in your planning documents. And we've seen that specifically in Peachland. Their active transportation network plan was approved this summer, and we're already seeing developments coming forward, and it's listed in the requirements from the district that they have to include within their development plans their portion of the trail. Without that, you're always trying to catch up. And frankly, once something has been built, you almost never go back to upgrade it. You need to do it as it's being developed, which is why I believe that the planning staffs told us, let's deal with Jubilee and Dixon because we see projects oncoming that can help that. So first thing is to get it into the planning. The second request is around a pop-up bikeway. This is a technique that many communities use when they're starting to invest in infrastructure. The most famous one was in Times Square in New York, which used to be entirely traffic centric. They actually closed all the traffic out of there, turned it into a pedestrian plaza, and it stayed that way because it was so popular. Now that's on the big scale. Many other communities just use, like in this example that you see in the photograph, just flower pots along a route to define a bikeway for a period of time so that they have a separated bike path for people to try out and see what it's like, because people don't understand drawings, but they understand it when they use it. So we would like the opportunity, with your approval, to start to examine options with your planning staff for this idea in time for next year. The last one is to wherever active transportation is being built within the district of Summerland, to follow the BC Active Transportation Design Guide. And why do we say that? It's because that guideline is scientifically designed to provide safe pathways. And the benchmark I would use is, would you take your child, a 10-year-old child, on a bike down a bike path if it's on a busy street and just a painted line? I bet you most of you would say no. And in fact, the research says that out of 100% of people, 30% of the people say, I'm never getting on a bike. That's not something to feel bad about, because that also means that 70% of the people will. But they only will if you build safe pathways. So the research that's been borne out is that 1% of those 70% will ride on a busy street with a painted bike lane. They're the ones that we call strong and fearless. There's no point spending money on that kind of thing if only 1% of the 70 are going to ride it. And I won't go through all of these, but frankly, if you build to the standard of an all ages and abilities pathway, which in many cases means a separated pathway, but not always on a very slow street. And there's benchmarks in the study. 100% of that 70% will ride those pathways. That's why it's so important to follow that. And BC has an excellent guide that is being implemented. And frankly, if you want to apply for funding, they have specific questions that say, point out to us where you do or do not meet those guidelines. So it's important to understand what's in those and how they apply. So if you want the funding, if you really want the funding, you have to comply with it. Second last slide. We just included a slide in here that you can follow the links if you want. Sometimes some of the objections are from the business community that it's going to cause problems for businesses. Worldwide, there are many examples that show that cyclists have more of a spending drop than people in cars because they stay longer and shop longer than people in cars. A lot of cars are just passing through. So there's a couple of pieces here that show that, over time, cycling in the downtown core actually improves business and the experience for your residents. So thank you. That's our presentation today on our 3 asks. And if you have any questions, I'd be very happy to answer.
Okay, thank you very much. So we'll deal with the requests in due course, but I'm sure council has some questions. Councillor Barkwell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Your first thing that you mentioned was adjusting the routes for the bike path. And the map that was up there looked pretty similar as far as what I could remember of what we have in our plan now. What changes are you suggesting? And I'll add, sort of before you go in, I'm a little concerned about the route as it is now, even actually down Kelly Avenue, because we have given approval to a number of developments there where we reduced our parking requirements. Mm-hmm. And parking, I don't know how we could take away parking on Kelly Avenue for bike lanes. Yeah.
We actually looked at that last year and talked to planning about how to reorganize some of the parking. And if I remember correctly, Vic, you have a better memory of it than I do, about concentrating the parking to one side and going to angle parking. Is that what we talked about? I can't remember at this time.
There's an opportunity to examine that.
Yeah, I think there's an opportunity to look at how parking is allocated. It may only be on one side of the street and more concentrated. I think it has to be a step-by-step look at each of these. It's not just a matter of saying putting in a bike lane. It's how do we accommodate all of this? And frankly, in some cases, if you look at Penticton, for example, on their lake-to-lake pathway, they did remove parking from one side of the street and turned that into a bike lane and concentrated it on the other, or found other ways to go around it. I mean, every community has this conversation. So do I have a specific answer for you right now? No, but we could pull out the documentation that we provided to the district. I think it was last year, to talk about.
Should add that this was all kind of part of the downtown plan, so it's kind of in there. Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you. Through the mayor, you mentioned the Fur Brigade Trail from Antlers Beach. That's what I'm familiar with. Antlers Beach out to Garnet Valley, and it's well defined and marked and everything like that. But I use it a lot. I'm an ATVer, please don't shoot me, but I've run into people on horseback, people on bicycles, local ranchers use it to drive their cattle. it seems like a really well-used, multi-use trail. Is that still acceptable? Do we all play nice together in the sandbox or?
That route, that's actually an interesting piece of the route. That's the only section that's left of the original Trail of the Okanogans, right? That was actually where they had the fur brigade, where they were doing fur trading, and later on the Gold Rush Trail. That's the only piece left in the Okanagan. It's an incredibly historic piece. It's also very much a protected piece by the PIB. They have a lot of commentary about that as part of their commonage claim. I think if you go to a number of the other places in the valley where we're seeing cyclists and hikers and horseback riders, typically we try to find alternate routes for ATV, because putting motorized traffic in conjunction with the rest of that is a little more difficult. There are other roads in that area that ATVers use. It's not just the Fur Brigade Trail to get up. I forget the name of it, but I think it's, I can't remember at the moment, but there are other roads in the area. And one of our ideas was that one of the Fur Brigade would be for the hikers and cyclists and horseback riders, and that the ATVers would be diverted onto a different route. But we haven't had huge discussions about this. What we're trying to do, our strategy is to connect from the north-south. So from the Bennett Bridge to Peachland at the moment, and from Soyuz up to Vaso Lake. There's a lot of difficult pieces in the middle, which is why we are so excited to have Tim Lazard on our board to talk about the lands through the PIB Reserve. We're having some very initial conversations about the piece that's along Skaha Lake at the moment, but we have to take baby steps. And as Tim has reminded us, all of this will be done at the band's discretion and their decision and their timeframe. So.
Councillor Trainer, and then Councillor Peak.
I just have two quick questions. I really like your idea of a pop-up bikeway. Is Cycling Week the same as Go by Bike?
I believe so.
It's the same thing? Okay. So I helped organize Bike to Work Week for several years in the mid 2010s, and it was really good. And so I think that adding something like this, maybe 1 or 2 days of that week or the entire week, is a really good idea. So yeah, that was my first comment. I think that that would definitely give people a chance to get on their bikes and feel what it's like to ride around downtown if they haven't yet. And then my second point, amending the cycling master plan. I guess, Lori, maybe you can answer this. How or what is involved in doing that? Just like Cole's notes. Like, is it a big change that we need to do, or do we just bring forward something?
Through the mayor to council, deputy mayor Trainer. I don't have the answer to that. It might be, an appendix to add to the current plan. I haven't been involved in actually making a change to a master plan, so it's something that we could take back as staff and look into it and come back to council with an option around that.
Sure, I would just be interested to know. Because plans do need to be updated and changed, and this one was done quite a while, well, 2018. So yeah, if we could just find out what's involved in changing a plan, and if there's public consultation required, I'd like to know that. Thanks.
Councillor Peak.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Janice, I'd like to thank you very much for your presentation and acknowledge the other good people that are here today. I was on the Trail of the Okanagan Society about 6 years ago, for about 6 years. So I really feel that the work that the society has done has created a great impetus across the valley. I remember when Mark Woods had work that he was doing with us, which he's continued to do, and I followed the conversation, dip in and out of it. I would like to say I really strongly believe that the bike lane policy should be a policy within our planning, because then it gives the opportunities to be available to the developers. It's right up front. There's no expectation in the background. They just know it's something that we need to follow, that this community expects that kind of quality in their community. The other thing I'd like to say in regards to Councillor Barkroll's remark, I was looking at when I look at the bike map, at one time, instead of going down Kelly, it went on the back lane. And maybe that's an opportunity, and that would put it off most of Kelly, come back on at the end. So maybe that's an opportunity, but I really support the suggestions that have been put forward by the group And I feel it very likely that we would incorporate them. Thank you for coming out today.
Yes, please.
Sorry, through the mayor. The reason we suggested it be moved to Kelly is that it provided a safe pathway for children to get to the school is really what we were looking at. And it's important to have the bike path go as directly as possible to those key destinations. And that's why we rerouted it in that way.
Councillor Betts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really appreciated this presentation. I really think this is a strong draw for our community and the Okanagan in general to be able to connect by bike and bring tourists into our community other than with motorized vehicles. So I really appreciate this effort. So, but my question is, outside of the downtown core, I've noted, I live up on Canyon View near the trestle, and cyclists come off the trestle and they stop and they don't know where to go. And so they often ask, and I'm like, you're best to look up Google Maps at this point. I can't explain it. So is there discussion about how we will connect, say, the KVR and the Trans-Canada Trail on, is it Fenwick, kind of where it comes at Simpson? Is there discussion about connecting that piece to the trestle, which would then head south? I mean, is that part of the discussion?
Yes, Don Gamel would like to speak, but I'd also want to just note that currently the PIB have no trespassing signs up on the KVR. They've recently taken over that land fee simple. They own it, which is a change from what was before. The Trans-Canada Trail technically goes along the water between Summerland and Penticton because they have wanted to go along the KVR, but didn't reach any agreement with the PIB at the time. So people are using the KVR, but I think we're going to see more activity from the PIB about usage in that area until they decide what they want to do with the lands that they just acquired. So, and if you don't mind, Don, I'd like to speak.
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Betts, and just looking at your question from another viewpoint, if you're coming from the west and through the Trans-Canada Trail and you arrive in Summerland, the Rotary Club of Summerland did construct a facility at Simpson Road and South Main, and it does have a trail map there. And you know, if we were to expect anybody to come north along the PIB lands to the trestle, it might be worthwhile to place another trail map right there at the station at the trestle.
I would agree. Thank you.
I just have a couple questions. One, it's excellent that Tim Lazard's on the board and that you're having discussions with the PIB. I'm just wondering if that means for your connection to Penticton that you're counting on connecting on the KVR trail, using that trail, or have you, or is the lakeside along the lake still an option? I know previously you did some work connecting all the little provincial parks there, and we were planning to go to UBCM to lobby for that with Ministry of Transport and BC Parks, but I think we need your direction on that, if that's still a supported route or not.
Thank you. What I can tell you is that we are always flexible. If there's another place that we can go, we will do that. We did raise money and hired an engineering firm to take a look at that, extending that route along the lakeshore. The existing trail there is non-standard. It's 8 feet wide instead of a minimum 10. There's very limited land there. The recent installation of the barriers has taken out any slush that we might have had to expand that trail. And also we were told as part of that study, and we can share with you that study that we received, was that we tried everything. We tried to say, you know, that land was assimilated when they built the highway, so it's not pristine shorefront. Would Modi or would there's various ministries involved, would they consider some landfill into there? It's an absolute no. We tried to suggest that maybe we could rehabilitate it to, to repair the riparian area. And frankly, from the biologists, they said, we actually don't want to bring birds and animals there because they'll only be killed as they're flying away from their nests on the highway. The cost was a big reason initially that was taken away. There was an extraordinary, crazy $30 million cost in an earlier study for that. There were so many contingencies in that we frankly didn't believe it. But I think there's a couple things. It would be extremely difficult to do that because we know that what was currently built along the lake shore would not currently be permitted by Fisheries and Oceans or whoever it was. I can't remember the ministry that was involved, environment. They didn't like what happened there and they don't want it to happen again. And they won't let us touch the lake. And we've lost the land that we had with the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. We have thought about, could we go on the other side, on the hillside? And that seems to be a non-starter as well. You know what? We are willing to listen to anybody. We gave it our best shot a year ago and we can share the study with you that we received from the engineers. But it pretty much looked like they said no, that it wasn't possible, but we're happy to share with you the information. Now, with the PIB, we are taking baby steps. We are not talking about the whole thing. What we're trying to do is establish one smaller project down closer to Skaha. There seems to be some greater possibility about that. We think the most politically challenged is the piece that comes directly off the Channel Pathway and goes through some lands right down on the bottom. We might actually have to go to the north end of the Channel Parkway and then go through the neighborhoods on roadways and bypass some of those very sensitive political areas for the PIB. But we're not even having those conversations yet. We need to establish a good working relationship and have a win with a project that they see as a benefit, because right now they are not convinced that the trail through their lands is a benefit. So
we have the studies, so that's fine. And I understand, appreciate the challenges you've had getting the various ministries interested. So the question, I guess, from our perspective is it worth us escalating it and up to the ministerial level and for us to start talking to ministers about it? Or, if there's no hope, then we shouldn't waste our political capital, so to speak, doing that. And I guess this is where you could probably tell us better than we can. And so I don't know. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah, well, I guess I don't think it hurts asking the question one more time. I really don't. Because we're in a bit of a sticky spot with the rest of it. If both options were open, personally, I would vote for the one that goes through the PIB because it's already at railway grade. It's away from the highway. It's incredibly picturesque. It takes cyclists where they want to go. Even though we would have a separated bike path along the lake and it would connect to those parks, which I think is a huge benefit. It's not as nice because you're going right beside high traffic, but I'm a pragmatist. If we don't get the KVR and we don't get the highway, we don't have a trail. So I would say I keep all my options open and I don't think it's a harm to ask the question.
Thank you. One other question to ask you, to get your feedback on, a more difficult one this time. We hear about the criticism in Penticton on bike trails and the criticism that you alluded to that we're receiving here, I think putting in a bike trail, receiving criticism to put in a bike trail to provide safety to 12-year-olds getting to school, I think kind of took a lot of us aback a little bit. And do you notice this kind of pushback in other communities, or is it just Summerland Penticton?
Looking at the history of trying to provide bike paths through urban communities, through urban settings, there's always going to be somebody who complains, and you always get the complainers first, right? Because they're saying nobody rides here. And our comment is, well, nobody rides here because there's nowhere to ride. And if you look at Vancouver, Beach Avenue, busiest street that you can, people going down there, they took out a whole lane and and changed it to one-way traffic on Beach Avenue to put the cycling on the other side. Huge complaints about taking out laneways on Burrard Street Bridge. It's now the heaviest used bridge of any community in North America for cyclists. You know, there is a groundswell for this happening. Just go look at what's happening in Kelowna. Kelowna has one of the highest number length of bike lanes per capita of any town in Canada. And there's huge amounts of people. And I would argue that it's not just taking 12-year-olds to school. That, you know, the school is right there, but that bike path isn't just for the school. That bike path is for the entire community who might be riding downtown to work or to shop. It might be the tourists that are coming through once we get the whole trail in. And I didn't bring the presentation today that we gave to the Committee of the Whole here a couple of years ago that talked about the economic benefits and the potential for the numbers that are riding. And the number that I always remember is when they put in the trail for the Okanagan Rail Trail, they were projecting 500,000 people would use that trail in 5 years. Well, they did that in the first year, and it's not even fully connected. Like, you can't ride past the airport at the moment. So there is, I think all that demonstrates is this latent demand for cycling. And I've witnessed in Peachland, people bushwhacking trails, trying to get from Peachland over to West Kelowna. And they've personally maintained those trails, and I wouldn't ride them, but they are commuters. They're hardcore commuters that are trying to get from place to place. So our point is that once you put in the trail, you're going to be surprised at how many people our age, my age, 60 and over, who are now getting on bikes because e-bikes are available. Like, the whole world has changed in that regard. So yes, if you build a block of bike trail, you're going to get a lot of criticism. But if you build a system, people will use it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Barkwell.
So are e-bikes permitted in the bike lanes? Yeah, because
Yes.
that certainly is a growing area. I have to agree there. Everybody I know is buying e-bikes.
Yes. And the best part about e-bikes is that it really opens it up for people. I would frankly not be a cyclist if I didn't have an e-bike. Particularly in Peachland where I live, I wouldn't be able to get up Princeton. I'm not going to push my bike up a hill, but I go all the time. We were the first people in our block to have a bike, and now every house has an e-bike.
Thank you. Councillor Van Elsen.
Do you feel the rebate the province has offered for the e-bike program is probably quite a popular program?
I think they were oversubscribed in the first hour.
Wow, because I have friends that have them. I don't have one, but I was watching a really good friend of mine, a lady in Garnet Valley, and I was merging off Jones Flat onto Garnet Valley, and it was quite a hill, and she came up that hill and away she went.
If you have never been on an e-bike, borrow one and try one. You'll have the biggest smile on your face.
Thank you.
Provincial programs are never oversubscribed, really. Councillor Peak.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I really want to reinforce what you said about the past presentations from the Trail of the Okanagan in returns of economic development. It's really well known, not just here, but down the coast on either side of America, as well as in Europe, that bike trails and lanes make a big, big difference to people's health, the economy. It's a real tourism boom, and those dollars would make a difference for our communities as well. So I really applaud you at the work you're continuing to do.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any further comments. Thank you very much for coming today.
Thank
Very
you.
appropriate timing. Our next delegation is Sue Kirschman from First Things First Okanagan. Sue,
Thank you.
just go ahead.
Let's see all this works. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sue Kirschman, and I'm speaking today on behalf of First Things First Okanagan. For those of you who don't know who we are, we're a local nonprofit society established in 2015, I believe. And we have members throughout the South Okanagan, including in Summerland, about 100 members. And we have about over 1,000 people who subscribe to our monthly newsletter, and we're active in increasing awareness about climate change and looking at solutions, local solutions. So we're fortunate to live in a beautiful place. However, increasingly, our health and economic prosperity is being threatened by climate change. Wildfires, heat domes, droughts, and floods are becoming more and more frequent. I'm not here today to add to anyone's climate anxiety, though. I'm here to bring a solution. Summerland has a comprehensive energy and emissions reductions plan and a low carbon resiliency strategy, which prioritizes actions that both mitigate emissions and also help the community adapt to a changing climate. And some of the examples are your solar and storage facility project, the adjacent eco-village concept plan, and Summerland's distributed electricity generation program. Today, I'll be focusing on buildings, which produce about a third of Summerland's greenhouse gas emissions. You're likely familiar with this diagram of BC's energy step code. It shows how energy efficiency must improve with each step up. Higher step codes require better insulation, higher R value windows, tighter building envelope, which altogether result in less heat being lost to the outdoors. While greater efficiency is important, it won't in itself get us to net zero emissions. This graph shows how emissions can still be significant at the higher steps of the energy step code. On the vertical axis, those are the greenhouse gas emissions. And on the horizontal axis are the steps of the energy step code. And you can see the little light green homes near the bottom. Those are ones that are heated with electric heat pumps. The dark green ones are homes that are heated with electric furnaces or baseboard heating. And the tall gray lines are homes that are heated with gas. And you can see even at the higher step codes 4 and 5, if the home is heated by gas, the emissions are still significant. And this is why the BC government has created another complementary step code, which is called the Zero Carbon Step Code. And this specifically targets emissions. This new code regulates a home's emissions by measuring its carbon performance. And carbon performance is basically how much greenhouse gas a building emits day to day through space and water heating. Key points of the code are that it applies to new buildings only. It is for both multifamily and single family dwellings, and it doesn't apply to secondary heating sources. Here's a little diagram of the code. And like the energy step code, it has different levels of progressively higher standards. Unlike the energy code, though, which requires changes in construction materials and techniques, the zero carbon code simply involves choice of fuel type. So for example, in most cases, that moderate level of carbon performance can be met by electrifying either your space heating or your hot water system. And the top level, the zero carbon level, can be met simply by using electricity throughout the building. This new zero carbon code became available to communities on May 1st of this year. And it's optional at this point, but it will likely be required in the near future. The province has mandated zero carbon performance by 2030, but it hasn't yet defined the lower intermediary steps. There are 12 municipalities that have already adopted the new zero carbon step code. And a number of these have actually gone straight to the highest code. They're looking to implement it quite quickly. Some of them as early as this fall, some in January, some next summer. And a number of other communities are currently consulting with industry and are working towards adopting it. And as many of us have learned, retrofitting homes is expensive and complicated. If we adopt the zero carbon step code now, while we're in a building boom, we can not only reduce Summerland's emissions, but also avoid homeowners and renters from having large retrofit costs down the road. And these are some advantages to building better now. Homeowners and renters will be happy because of lower heating costs, year-round comfort, higher home values, and as I just mentioned, no expensive retrofits. There could be cost savings for builders. And from the district's perspective, Summerland would be supporting its low carbon resiliency strategy. In summary, First Things First Okanagan encourages the district to adopt the new zero carbon step code and to do so as soon as possible. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Sue. Council questions, Councillor Barkwell.
So does the zero carbon standard include the use of heat pumps?
That is what most are doing.
Mhm.
So either air source or ground source heat pumps are the most efficient. I mean, you could go electric furnace or electric baseboard, but those are less efficient and more expensive.
Very expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Councillor Peak.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for coming today. I wanted to ask, because I'm doing a lot of work with BC Housing. Do you know if BC Housing has adopted the zero carbon?
I don't know about BC Housing. We've talked to the BC Home Builders Association, so from the industry perspective. And it's adopted by municipalities. So I guess it would be whether or not they support it. And the Home Builders Association are looking at it. And because it's actually not a huge change to the builders, in all the communities that have already adopted it, the building community has been quite on board with it.
Thank you. I might encourage you to do some writing to the BC Housing, because when I approach them, they have a very moderate program in terms of green buildings, and I think this would be an excellent choice going forward for them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Betts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I definitely appreciate this presentation. I think that every time that we look for solutions and how to move things forward, because that's often the point where I get stuck. As somebody who's really concerned about climate change and our future, I really like a presentation about solutions. So in terms of council and having a discussion on how to best implement ideas that come forward, such as this one, may I ask the mayor or our CAO, but how do we move forward with having a fulsome discussion on whether this could be, proper for our community?
Thank you for the question through the mayor. So what we would normally do is action any direction from council. So if council wanted to report with options on this, prospective costs, sort of thing, to foster further council deliberation, we would be happy to action that. But it'd usually be a request for a report from staff.
Thank you. So does that require a motion, or can we request that you would come forward with a report like that?
Thanks for the question. Always good to have a motion on something like that for our own tracking and any addition to council priorities, that sort of thing.
Councillor Van Alphen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just through the CAO and to our presenter, but this may be an excellent presentation to do at our development planning committee. I just think like these are the representatives of our community that are the building community, and there's representatives on there that are construction people. And I just think it'd be such a valuable presentation to give at that level too. And I agree with Councillor Betts that, this is something that we definitely need to have a further conversation around the council table sooner than later. I was very fortunate this year to take advantage of some pretty substantial rebate programs, provincially and federally, on retrofitting my electric high cost furnace to a heat pump air handler type system. And with the rebates, it was pretty amazing what the province and the feds are doling out to try to convert your home to be more efficient. And it was really an interesting process because I wasn't aware, I had an energy audit done, and they came in and did a blower door test. I thought, oh, okay, that's interesting. And then before I was able to submit for my rebates, they came back after all the installs were done and did another blower door test and have, the different readings and stuff. So it's quite an extensive program. Like, you just don't get the money for nothing, but it's well worth it. So I'm hoping to see reduced costs in my utility bills, Mr. Director of Finance. Thank you.
Councillor Trainer.
I first heard about this. I think there was an article in the Globe and Mail a while ago talking about Vancouver going to zero. And do you know when theirs takes effect? I'm pretty sure it's like either this year or next year, they're banning all gas heating in the city for new builds.
Yeah, Vancouver's fairly soon. I don't know exactly when,
Yeah,
but I do know
it's-
on the island, Victoria, Saanich, some of the ones I listed on there,
Yeah.
they're starting in November of this year.
They are, okay.
And there are others in, can't remember which ones, in January. And Nanaimo just voted in the highest level recently, and they're going straight to step code 4 next July.
Okay, so they're moving pretty
They're moving quickly. And
quickly. Okay,
there is a measure only option that you could do for the first couple months or whatever, just to get industry up to speed with it. But
Okay.
apparently a lot of the building software programs already capture this data. So, you know, you could do a short trial of the measure only where they don't actually have to implement the code as a
okay,
kind of a little bit of a learning, you know, learning tool. But
okay.
there are a number of bylaws out there and a lot of information that other communities would be,
Have
I'm
already
sure,
done. Right.
willing to share.
Have you given this presentation to any other communities in the valley, and what was their response so far?
We gave it to Penticton in June, I believe, and they are having staff look at it.
Okay,
Yeah, and we're planning to do the regional district early in the fall.
okay, great. Thank you for that.
I think it would be useful getting a staff report just to get the province's perspective. I would like to understand, what the thinking is behind having the staggered approach. And also things like one of the challenges with the step code has been the whole need for an energy advisor, and that the capacity of energy advisors in the region has been somewhat limited. So I don't know if that's required with the zero carbon one or not, but I think we should, these are sort of it's kind of information we need to find out. Councillor Peak, then Councillor Barkwell.
I agree with the discussion, Your Worship. Could we bring that motion forward that we request a report from staff regarding the zero emissions presentation and what the possibilities of use for our community and implementation?
Okay.
Maybe Kendra can do that.
Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Betts, corporate officer, did you get that more or less? Yeah, thanks. Okay, discussion on the motion. Councillor Barkwell.
Yeah, this is sort of almost the same thing as what I was going to ask earlier. So this afternoon or this evening, we have a discussion on the Eco Village Sustainability Framework. And I just wondered how this motion and the zero carbon relates to what is presented in that request for decision, and whether, this is, I'm just not sure how it all fits together. Maybe I'll understand better after this discussion this evening. And maybe a more refined motion might be better after we've had that discussion on the Eco Village, or maybe this is, community-wide sort of a concept, so maybe not. Just like to hear what people think there. And if I could ask our delegation if they have looked at the agenda item tonight on the Eco Village and have any comments on that. Okay, you might want to come to the discussion this evening at 6.
Councillor Betts, then Councillor Peak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My understanding, Councillor Barkwell, correct me if I'm wrong, I think tonight's discussion will be quite directed at the Eco Village development concept. And as much as I see that they are similar, I feel like the BC Zero Carbon Step Code would be community-wide. Whereas I think what we're trying to accomplish with the Eco Village is high level and really special and designed to be at the highest levels, which wouldn't really be, I think, achievable for every single house built or home or multi-unit in our community. But I enjoyed the discussion either way.
Okay, Councillor Peak.
Yeah, I envision this motion being community-wide, but I invite the discussion that Councillor Barkwell has said regarding how this would work into the discussion this evening. And when we're looking at the Eco Village and how we might measure what we would need to see happen there, I think there may be value in looking at this standard.
I don't know if you have heard of the geo exchange systems for, I guess they call it like geothermal heat pumps. There is a company in Kelowna who we have had present at one of our webinars, and they provide the services as a utility. So they cover all the funds of putting in the geo exchange field, and then each home pays just as they would pay your electricity bill or your gas bill, but you're paying for geothermal instead. So they're doing up in Kelowna. A lot of developments are going with this system, and there'll be a couple hundred homes linked to like a large geothermal. So I just wanted to throw that out there because that might be something that might be interesting tonight.
Thank you. CO, did you have something?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe Councillor Patton's online. He has a question on Zoom.
Okay, I didn't know he was here. Councillor Patton, if you can hear us.
I can. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Sue, for your presentation. I do have a question. So you were saying May 1st was the zero carbon step code came into play for municipalities to opt into if they so want to. And I did notice that a lot of the Lower Mainland that deal with the Vancouver building bylaw, which has no impact on the BC building code, are actually following the City of Vancouver's building bylaw in regards to that. My question, I guess, is have you taken into account also the changes in the BC building code as of May 1st of 2023, where they included a whole new section under 9.37, which is greenhouse gas emission, and also in 936 that they've also added in. So I understand to adopt the zero carbon step code, but I think that a CEA will still be required, certified energy advisor will still be required in regards to this. And within his documentation that he's going to have to submit to the district since step 3 was mandated also this year, that the greenhouse gas emission and that component of the build will have to be taken into account for. Now, I'm not sure if the 937 is more stringent than what the zero carbon step code is at this point, but have you reviewed the BC building code in regards to the new 9.37 for greenhouse gas emissions?
I have not looked at those specifics, but the energy step code is concerned with energy efficiency. So my understanding is it's about your building envelope, your systems to try and retain heat in a home, not with which fuel is used. And it's the fuel that creates the emissions.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you, except that 937 does deal with emissions, does deal with natural gas, propane. It also deals with exactly what you're speaking of. So I think this is great, the zero carbon step code. I really do. I think it's phenomenal. But I also think that that 937 for our district is moving in that direction for in regards to zero emissions also. So I just wanted to throw it out there because it's there. And when you probably presented to the City of Penticton in June, this was just coming in since it was May 1st. So it's very interesting in regards to the zero carbon step code and the greenhouse gas emissions now that are being reflected as a prescriptive requirement in the BC building code.
I do know that some of the, there is some concern with the higher step codes 4 and 5 in terms of embodied carbon. So trying to make the homes more and more efficient at some point, like some of the builders are saying the costs are just getting quite high. And you can also have using a lot of foam insulations. Some of the material actually has a higher carbon components. So some communities are going to this step code or the zero carbon step code and staying at step code 3. Or some are going to 4, but I think rather than going to step code 5, they're doing a combination of the slightly lower step code and the zero carbon step code.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you 100%. I think once we're starting to get up to step code 5s, you can't use a spray foam anymore. You have to use a natural insulation base. So, which again will reduce your R values. So thicker walls, of course. So yeah, no, I agree. It's a huge learning curve for us moving into the next few years in regards to our carbon emissions. That's for sure. But I really appreciate your presentation. It was fantastic.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Patton. Councillor Van Elfen, then I'll call the question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one quick comment. In Summerland, the school district at the middle school and the high school have done extensive geothermal work. And they have a lot of schools in Penticton that have a lot of solar. And I think if you check with the school district, the ground source geothermal here in Summerland, the payback is much more than the solar is in other areas. I don't have the numbers, but it definitely reduces their operation expenses significantly because of the geothermal here in Summerland. Thanks.
Okay, we got to get moving. Last one, Councillor Barker.
Just a quick comment for the benefit of our delegation. On top, besides the community-wide aspect of things that this motion will address, I think it's pretty simple for the eco-village discussion. All we need to say is that we'll have electric heat and no gas services there, and we'll be at the top of the curve, and it's that simple.
Okay, thank you. So I'll call the question requesting a staff report. All in favor? None opposed, that carries. Okay, thank you, Sue. That's great.
Thank you.
Yeah. Moving on to public comment period. Don't see any. No, nobody online. No. Move on to our business items. First up is the Recreation Center referendum. Laurie Mullen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, Council. This council meeting's communications update is a short one, just to advise council that work continues to build the 10-week communications plan rollout, which is anticipated to start the end of August. The videographer has completed video footage, which has included filming the current condition of the Summerland Aquatic and Fitness Center, clips of current users, interviewing staff, Mayor Holmes, Councillor Peak, a school principal, as well as user group representatives. The referendum branding has been finalized, and we have begun branding the communication materials. Examples of the branding is in the council report and in attachment 2. The project tagline has been set with "Our community, your vote," and will be included in many of the communication templates. The communications campaign includes weekly media releases, 2 social media posts each week with a question of the week and a "Did you know" post. Advertisements will be provided to the local media outlets, including print and radio, as well as information in the utility newsletter. We have been reaching out to local organizations to see if they would like a dedicated presentation about the referendum for their members. As well, we will be connecting with a few of the housing complexes. We are also aiming to get to the local school staff meetings to do presentations. We will be putting up information booths at key locations with communication materials that the public can view and take away with them. And we're targeting Wednesday, October 11th from 4:30 to 7 p.m. at the Arena Banquet Room for a public open house. We are also looking at setting up drop-in times at the Summerland Aquatic and Fitness Center for public to attend to receive information and ask questions of staff. We will be providing an opportunity for the public to attend a behind-the-scenes tour of the Aquatic Center during our annual shutdown. And attached to the council report is the most recent version of the frequently asked questions document. This document will continue to get updated as common questions come forward. And lastly, I will just note that the community will continue to be directed to the summerland.ca /recreation center website to gain access to all the project information and hard copies will become available for people upon request. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Council, any questions? Councillor Peak.
This is a question that's been asked of me that I don't know the answer to. On the statistic of 74% of the population using the aquatic center, I'm wondering how that survey was done or how it was arrived at. And if you don't know the answer now, you can let me know later.
Through the mayor to Councillor Peak, are you referring to one of the statistics that we've provided is the number of people that are current members of the Summerland Aquatic and Fitness Center database, and that's where people register for programs or book facilities. And so we have just under 12,000 people that are members, and 70% of those are Summerland residents. Is that the statistic you're referring to?
I would suspect that's what was being referred to, so I appreciate knowing how that was arrived at.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Betts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of the facts that I think could maybe be higher up in our frequently asked questions area would be around the potential savings in our energy costs and utility costs. I know that question is coming up, and with the build cost being as high as it is, there are really truly some significant opportunities for some operational savings in terms of utility costs. And I think that's something that should be highlighted. One of the facts early on in the sheet, in the summary, is how our pool uses 86% higher per square foot than the average pool. I assume that's Canada. I wasn't sure, just it didn't mention Canada or North America or the States, but I think that would be a relevant number, is talking about the kind of savings that we bring to the residents of Summerland on just annual expenditures and utility cost.
Thank you. Laura, any comment or you got that? Okay. Anyone else? Councillor Van Elsen?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to our Director of Recreation, it was brought to my attention, or a question was asked to me at the farmer's market on Sunday. If this new facility comes in, would there be a possibility of a key fob, 24-hour access to the gymnasium, to the weight room?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councillor Van Elfen, through the mayor. We haven't got down to the specifics of that. I do know, I am aware of one other facility in town at least that provides 24 access. I guess it would come down to just liability and risk and potential access points of getting into the space. So we would have to consider a lot of factors before providing that opportunity. I'm not aware of many or any municipal run fitness rooms that provide that, but it's definitely something we could look into.
Okay. No questions. We just need a motion to receive. Councillor Van Elfen, Councillor Betts, all in favor? That carries. Now the referendum question. Corporate officer, please.
Thank you, Mayor Holmes. So as we continue with the fall 2023 referendum planning, the proposed question has been drafted and is before council for consideration. We do have it on the screen for your review. So the question must be crafted to enable electors to clearly express their preference on the long-term borrowing for the construction of a new recreation center. There are no special procedures required to establish a question for assent voting, and council may establish the question through resolution. To ensure electors fully understand the question and are clearly able to express their preference, a ballot for assent voting must be in the form of a question that enables electors to make an appropriate mark next to either the word yes or no. As the assent voting is for a long-term loan authorization bylaw, the question may include the key legislative requirements of the bylaw, including the purpose, the amount, and the term for borrowing. Staff have forwarded the proposed question to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs for review, and the ministry has responded stating that the question drafted meets all the legislative requirements and is suitable for the upcoming referendum. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Councillor Betts?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I was reading through this, the only comment that I wanted to bring forward is in terms of, I know there's a lot of technical aspect to the question. I respect that and understand it completely. But the first 5 words, are you in favor of? I just wanted to put it out there that I feel it could be simplified by saying, do you support loan authorization bylaw? Just there's a lot of detail in the rest of it. And are you in favor of is already, I hope that everybody understands the meaning of that word. And I know that I don't mean to underestimate people, but I think it could be even clearer. Do you support? Because the answer at the end is yes or no. Discussion?
Corporate Officer, do you have a comment on that or not?
Through the mayor to Councillor Betts, I haven't seen any that say, do you support? But we could try it and we could run it through the ministry and see what they say.
Councillor Peak and then Councillor Barkle.
I happen to agree with Councillor Betts. I find that those first 4 words a little flexible. I like, do you support? It's clear. I also look, and again, I don't understand for sure what has to be included. But when I look at this, it gets so wordy that I lose a little bit of what I'm thinking about I need to vote on. Do you have, if it said, do you support the Corporation of the District of Summerland to borrow up to 50 million with interest over a period not exceeding 30 years in order to finance the construction of a new recreation center? Does it say to be located? Could it just say at 8820 Jubilee Road East? It just is very wordy. It's more literary than it is concrete. I think it needs to be tightened up.
So the question is, do we need to specify the bylaw and do we need to specify the address?
Through the mayor to Councillor Peak, we have to specify the bylaw because that is actually what is being voted on. It is, do you support the bylaw, which allows us to borrow the 50 million? So that has to be included. We could remove the address. Yeah, we could run it, we could change it and we can run it through the ministry.
Councillor Peak.
In a loan authorization bylaw, we put at the bottom as opposed to at the top. Again, it just clogs up your mind when you're looking at what you have to vote. It just makes it more information than I need in the beginning. It's fine that the structure is you have to have a loan authorization that has to be in the resolution. Can it not be further down the resolution?
While we mull that over, I'll go to Councillor Park.
I guess my first question was, will it hold things up if we have to go back to the ministry to get changes, and how much would it hold things back?
Through the mayor to Councillor Barkwell. So we would have to get it approved and we would have to bring it back to council on the 29th of August, which would be the latest date because we have to start getting our ballots going relatively quickly.
And I understand where Councillor Peak is going, but on the other hand, most people will have made up their mind before they come into that ballot box area. And so, you know, they won't read much further than, are you in favor? Or, you know, and so that part of the wording, I don't argue one way or the other. I guess, though, if we wanted to have a discussion, I would prefer to say up to $50 million plus interest, rather than with interest, because to me, with interest, you know, does the $50 million include the interest? Or, you know, you might get questions about that.
Councillor Chair.
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Barkwell. I think he's absolutely right in that people will understand. I mean, it's a yes or no question, and you'll have the opportunity to check yes or no. So I think people going in will know already yes or no. But when I looked at this, the only thing that I had to read twice was with interest. So if there's a way to somehow clarify that, or maybe in our in our information, in the frequently asked questions, explain what that means. That would be helpful. But otherwise, I'm okay with it.
Okay, Councillor Van Elfen.
I'm okay with it. I agree. By the time I go into the ballot box, I've made up my mind. It's going to be a yes or no answer. I have a question through to our Director of Finance, if I could, and I know it's a discussion we had in the past. I just want some clarification. On the 50 million, 30 years, if I remember correctly, any new construction that comes on board after the referendum, let's say it passes, they will be charged the money, but that monies will not go to service the debt. Am I correct?
So through the mayor to Councillor Van Elfen, the way council has put forward funding the debt is a mix. So 50% through property taxation and 50% through a parcel tax. So in terms of the property tax component, so let's just use real simple numbers. So let's say the debt payment for the year is $500,000. So $250,000 is going to be recouped through a parcel tax, and $250,000 will be recouped through the property tax. So on the property tax side of things, we know that we need to generate $250,000 based on all assessed values. So as assessments go up, as properties are being built and those types of things, what we will do is we know that we need the 250, and then as the new assessments roll in, we will use those new assessments to change the tax multiple to ensure that we're only collecting $250,000. So as new properties are being built, in theory, one would think that your portion of that tax bill will go down as future properties are being developed.
Thank you for that clarification.
You're welcome.
Councillor Betts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As a follow up to that question exactly. So I understand how the property taxes would be distributed to new households that are built. What about the parcel tax? Would that as well be divided? Say we add 100 new homes each year. Does that get built onto everybody?
Thank you for the questions. Through the mayor, in terms of parcel taxes, what would happen is a parcel tax bylaw would be established depending on how the rates work in the council report that went to you guys, I think in June. And when new parcels would be created, what that would do is it would just generate additional property tax revenue that would come in. And so what the district would do is we would keep that money, and council would go into a reserve, and council could then determine whether they wanted to use that money to pay down the debt faster, which a lot of municipalities do in instances like this, or council could determine to utilize that on capital projects moving forward. But to go in and readjust that parcel tax bylaw every year, if not common practice.
Councillor Betts, yeah.
Thank you. But just because I'm not quite crystal clear on what you're sharing with us. So yes, new builds will take a share of the property taxes, but new builds will not take a share of the parcel tax.
So through the mayor, no, that's not what I said. They will, parcel taxes will be attached to new builds as well. Yeah.
Councillor Van Elfen.
So through the planner, so you're saying that then we can service this debt sooner? Or do we have to amortize this over the complete 30 years, or can we pay it off in 25 if we had that money in a reserve account? Or if we have to amortize it over 30 years, could we put that money in a reserve account? And when there's enough money, maybe in year 27, the rest of the population doesn't pay anymore and we start paying out of the reserve account. Don't want to complicate things,
So
but
through the mayor, there's a lot of what ifs there. Like a lot of what ifs. But in theory, the 50% that's being collected through property taxes, that 50% will always remain what we absolutely have to collect. Like there's no wiggle room there. There's no, we're going to collect more, we're going to collect less. It's always going to be what we have to collect. The parcel tax is the one that if we're creating a lot of brand new parcels within the district, yes, we'll probably see a little bit more money coming in through the parcel tax. Now, what those numbers would be, I honestly could not tell you right now. But it is something that as we're moving forward through the 30-year amortization period of this project, we have certain rules that we're required to follow through MFA. We can't just decide in year 3, well, we want to throw a $2 million payment on this loan. There's certain criteria we have to meet. There's certain deadlines that we have to hit. Normally it's every 5 years when the terms come up. Those are the only times we can make payments. So it would be, there's a lot of different factors that we would need to look into before we can get to, okay, well, we're in year 27 now and let's just pay the whole thing off. A little more complicated than that, but to go to your comment, yes, it would be something that if we are receiving this additional property parcel tax revenue, it would be up to council to make that determination as to whether or not you wanted to utilize that to pay down debt in the future, or you could utilize it to further capital projects as well.
thank you.
Okay, so just back to the referendum question. I think it has to be with interest, not plus interest, because to borrow up to $50 million plus interest means that we're borrowing the interest as well as the $50 million. And we're not borrowing the interest, we're borrowing the $50 million. And that comes with interest. And that's the wording that the banks use. And so I think it has to be with. Plus changes the meaning. Plus means that we're borrowing more than 50 million. And I don't think there's really any difference between in favor or in support of. I think people can get the difference. All which to say is I'm fine with the question the way it is, but it's up to council to put a motion on the table. Councillor Peak.
I certainly find it clear with do you support the corporation rather than are you in favor? Even if we have to take it back to the ministry, it would come back on the 29th.
Councillor Betts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm with Councillor Peak. I just think right now, the way that the new one that you completed is, do you support the corporation of the District of Summerland borrowing up to $50 million with interest? That is the heart of the question. We've put some of the other details down below, but it's before the loan authorization bylaw. That's the detail. It's not the question. This is the question. And I think it's really important. And I do think, do you support? That's what is the yes or no. So I like this one. It's my vote.
Okay, the only thing is the word center needs to be after recreation, not after the comma, but that's a cut and paste error. Okay. Would you like to put that on the table, Councillor Betts?
Yeah, I will. Just now that second word center after the bylaw needs to go. There we go.
Okay, got a seconder for that. It's the first, Councillor Peak. So it's the first question up there. Any further discussion?
If I may, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, Yeah, I don't see it, Counselor Patton. So yeah,
No.
you have to shut out like that. Please go ahead.
Yell at you, no problem there. I guess the big question is, before this moves forward, does our corporate officer feel that it will be ready by the 29th? And if it's not ready by the 29th, as she was saying, that it could push things back. And so I guess my question is, does our corporate officer feel that the province will give her a resolution over the naming or the changes so that it can come back to council by the 29th?
Corporate officer.
Through the mayor to Councillor Patton, I think so. They're pretty responsive. When it comes, we won't get an answer today or tomorrow, but probably by the end of this week.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Counselor Betts.
I apologize for my grammatical impudence at this one. Kendra, is it possible of the new recreation center to be located at 8820 Jubilee Road East by way of loan authorization bylaw? I'd like to complete the sentence there. Because it's the new rec center at that address by way of loan authorization bylaw. I'm sorry, but thank you.
Does that need a friendly amendment or anything? Yeah, okay.
If I may, your worship, I'll take it as a friendly amendment, this to go forward.
Okay, second, Counselor Betts, so discussion on the amendment. Counselor Bart on the amendment, not the motions. Okay, all in favor of the amendment? Any opposed? None opposed, that carries. Sia, did you have something?
Well, just to thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I guess I could ask Kendra too, but I think with the wording as is written on the screen, council's approved the question subject to provincial review. So if provincial review is thumbs up, I don't think it needs to come back to council again on the 29th.
No.
Right? I think we're
Right.
good. So, right? That's a question, I guess. Kendra says it's fine.
Okay, so I'll call the question on the question. All in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, that carries. Okay. Financial resource, Director of Finance, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the first 6 months of 2023 have been very comparable to previous years. Operational revenue is on track across all funds. The largest component of general fund revenue, as council is aware, is property taxation, which was billed in May of 2023. Water, sewer, and electrical fund revenue figures are all close to 50% of budgeted amounts, which is reflective of projected year-end totals. On the expense side, all cost centers are below 50% of budgeted amounts. Many variances are simply timing differences, with the related work being completed in late summer or early fourth quarter, and year-end adjustments that won't be recorded until the fourth quarter as well. Now, specifically, the three lowest cost centers are general fund debt and transfers, water supply and distribution, and sewer collection and treatment. All of these cost centers have large MFA debt payments for which principal payments aren't due until October of 2023. All other expense cost centers are over 30% mark when compared to budgeted figures. and the majority having expenses specific to work being completed in the third quarter of 23. Overall, the district is in a healthy financial position and there are no concerns identified. And that summarizes my report, or Renee's report. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Any questions? Councillor Peak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Dave, there were two questions. I didn't understand that we had an auxiliary policing force. Because there's a cost for auxiliary policing of 18,500 as a budget for 2023.
Just pulling up some detail. I'm just going to need a minute.
Thank you.
All right. CMP. So in terms of auxiliary policing, this is through the mayor. Auxiliary policing is just a heading. We do have the biggest component of that is a community policing coordinator and crime analyst that is paid out of the city of Penticton, as well as some victim service assistance program that is paid through that as well.
Thank you for that breakdown. If I may, another question regarding the police portion of this. I was very surprised at the electricity cost. Under the police station, it's 27,979, recognizing that it's broken out, not covered all for the portion of the report. But I was surprised because City Hall is only 14,000. Can you check that out later? I'll come and ask somebody like Renee. Thank you.
Yeah, all district buildings are metered. So the police station is a fairly big building. But I don't really know how to answer your question.
I have to put them on a 4-day work week, I guess. Any other questions? If someone could bring the motion to receive. Councillor Van Elfen, Councillor Trainer, all in favor? That carries. Council Chambers decorum, corporate officer, please.
Thank you, Mayor Holmes. So at the July 18th regular council meeting, council requested that staff draft rules of decorum for council chambers and council meetings and to be brought back for council consideration. Staff have reviewed various other municipalities and have identified elements that were common in other rules around decorum and council meetings. So some of these elements include asking members of the public to refrain from disorderly or boisterous conduct, refrain from displaying signs, placards, banners, or other symbolic objects, turn cell phones to silent or vibrate, remain seated unless approaching the podium or entering or leaving the meeting, refrain from entering the formal council and staff area at any time, refrain from making threatening or profane, abusive, personal, slanderous, impertinent, or unduly repetitious comments, refer to council members by their official titles, such as mayor and councillor, to respect the democratic process. And where rules on decorum are not followed, by an individual, the chair has a primary responsibility for maintaining order and uniformly enforcing the rules of decorum. And should council choose the elements identified in the report that is before council, they can be incorporated into a council procedure bylaw amendment. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Council, any questions? Councillor Peak.
I thought some of these suggestions were particularly noteworthy, and I would say the last 4 bullets as presented in the report should be part of our decorum.
Anyone
If I may-
else?
If I may, Mr.
Yeah, Councillor Patton.
Thank you. Question to our corporate officer. The last bullet where the chair has the authority to ask that individual to leave the meeting. Does it have to be in our council bylaw, or can it, or does it is like stand alone where it's a common sense thing?
Through the mayor to Councillor Patton, it is a standalone. However, to have it written in the bylaw only gives the chair that much more room to stand on when using it. Because I assume some individuals may not like it. So it just gives us that a bit more teeth.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Peak.
I recognize that there had been discussion initiated by you that we might actually post this in the council chamber. And I think that in a reference for the public, I don't think that's a bad idea at all, as well as having it on our website or all the things that we might normally do. So I would support that as well.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Betts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just note that I think having, we already have a code of conduct for staff and for council members, and that this is building upon that, setting an established expectation of all our residents and people who come to this workplace. And I think, and I support that. It's really just putting in place some clear measures and that we can share with residents when they come in that they know. And so I think that can only be a positive thing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Trainer.
I like the first bullet point because having sat here for as long as I have, I would say that that is the most disruptive when council is having a discussion and we might not agree, but that's okay. That's what we're supposed to do, is have a discussion back and forth, and the audience either claps or makes noises for either viewpoint. I find really distracting and really rude. And so I'm glad that that's there. The only thing refrain, it would almost be better to have something stronger, like will not, if you're in the audience, you will not do these things, because refrain is kind of like, please don't do it. But, audience members will not boo, shout, clap. Because then if they do, the mayor or the chair can say, you know what, you're not following what's written on the wall. I'd like to ask you to leave. Refrain is just, it's polite. That's all.
It's
Canadian.
It's a more respectful word.
It is. I just, yeah.
Councillor P.
I think refrain is just fine. I just think it works, and I do believe in that respectfulness.
I think it's important that it's not just in order to help us have a more conduct our business in a respectful way, but it's also to help members in the public in the gallery who attend the meetings to be heard respectfully and not be intimidated. So that's an equal importance. Yeah. So are we, so the question that we're being asked to, if we're okay with these the way they are, and further, if we want them to become drafted into our procedure bylaw or not. So there's kind of two parts, right? So we can pass them and post them without them becoming part of our procedure bylaw, or if they're part of our procedure bylaw, corporate officer, you can clarify, but then they have more teeth. Is that the idea?
They have more teeth and they're just a bit more uniform and applied consistently for whoever's in the chair position next, or they're just in that written format.
Okay, so someone want to bring a motion forward? Councillor Betts? As presented, the rules as presented? Yeah, okay. Councillor Peak, you're seconding. Okay, any further discussion? You got that, Corporate Officer? Yeah. So I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? That carries. We're back on track more or less. So we'll take a break. 2:45. That work?
Yeah. 40.
So council has published strategic plan priorities. They go from 22 to 26, a council term mandate, and they're living documents. So as we encounter new priorities that need to be worked on, sometimes that eventuates in other ones slowing down or stopping. And sometimes we don't get a grant, and so that one gets put on hold, et cetera, et cetera. So what we like to do is a couple times a year, revisit those priorities and make sure we're keeping track of any changes that need to take place, which is indeed what we're doing today. And in terms of some of the changes that we are wanting to capture, one is we have already achieved the free transit priority, and it is completed ahead of schedule, and it's being rolled out as we speak. So that one would be captured there with an amendment made. Also, council had staff add the domestic second services program after these priorities were introduced and published. And so that one has been added, and the effect of that has also been to slow down the distributed generation program. So a slight addition there on the DSS. Rodeo Grounds Master Plan is now targeted to be completed in Q3, and a couple of tweaks to the downtown plan implementation. Otherwise, everything else remains the same. And what we'd like to do is have council approve the strategic plan as amended, and then we would get it up on the district website just to make sure the public has the latest document for our reporting purposes. With that, I can take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, somebody want to bring the motion forward to amend the council strategic priorities? Councilman Alphen, Councillor Peak, any discussion? Maybe we just get that up on the screen. Yep, as written. Okay, thank you. And I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? That carries. 7.7, the next page. BC Transit Futures Action Plan, and this will be for Odessa. Go on.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Council and Mayor. So for this report today, I'm presenting a recommendation from staff following the council request to bring back more information on the two recommendations from BC Transit regarding the Transit Future Action Plan. Within that action plan, there were two recommendations for service extension, one being a new local route 32, and the other is an extension of services on Sundays. So that would be for the existing Route 30. So in that analysis, I've put together a summary in this report here of the cost and details of those two service extensions. To start off with Route 32, the idea of this route would be to provide service 6 days a week, Mondays to Saturday. It would go between Trout Creek, Lower Town, and Downtown, and it would cost the district annually $73,414. With that being said, it would provide service to areas of the District of Summerland that are not currently serviced with the Route 30, which goes between Summerland and Penticton. Engagement would move forward in 2023 and then with the residents of the district here. And then the the district would apply for grant funding through BC Transit in order to secure funds to support this project in 2024 with an anticipated operation in 2024 and 2025. The second recommendation, looking at the extended service hours for Sundays for Route 30, would add an additional 450 service hours. Because the current Route 30 does not currently collect fares, the costs associated with this particular project are assuming that costs are being collected. So that would be assumed that into operation of Sunday service hours. We would need to look at how our free fare program would impact that as well with regards to revenue. If it is collecting revenue, the idea or the anticipated amount for cost of the route itself annually each year would be $36,129. So staff are recommending that council consider the transit expansion for a Summerland local route 32 at this time. Collector route within the community may represent an area of greater unmet need, providing transit stops between Trout Creek, Lower Town, and downtown, which are currently not connected on the existing Route 30. Importantly, the creation of Route 32 also aligns with Council's Community Emissions Reduction Plan action T5, being expand transit opportunities to improve bus services and add additional transit amenities for the residents of Summerland. If a fare is charged, the addition of a new bus route would also provide a small revenue stream from transit fares with an expected revenue stream of $4,417. If any of these recommendations are moved forward by council, a memorandum of understanding would be required from BC Transit for either of the recommendations based off of the Transit Future Action Plan report. Going down to the cost breakdown, it should be noted that vehicle requirements are needed for either of these options. If the individual options are proceeded with, so if we were to go with just a Sunday service, only a single vehicle is required. However, if we were to go with both of the options, if council would like to see both recommendations move forward, we would only need 2 vehicles for that. And then with the Route 32, there would also be 2 buses required for that. So those are the requirements, both at a cost and a infrastructure level for those 2 different recommendations. And the full breakdown is also in the report here with more detail. Because this the BC Transit system at the local municipal level is funded in part by the district and in part by the province, there are some costs that are not covered through the revenue. So there is a cost loss because of this. However, anything that is not covered in the revenue stream would be supplemented through regular operations, which is currently the process for Route 30, which has been in place for a number of years. So that is expected as part of any budget amendments and budget allocations for 2024. With that being said, the 2 recommendations in place, or sorry, at the end of this report is that council proceed with the creation of a new Summerland Local Route 32 as recommended in the BC Transit 2023 Transit Future Action Plan, and that staff include operating costs just for this year for Route 32, which would be $24,471.33 for the 2024 operating budget. And that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Council questions, please. Councilor Betts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Odessa, can you tell me, or Chelsea as well, what's the timeline on the implementation of Route 32?
Through the chair. So at the end of this, it should be in operation by 2024, 2025. We would essentially, if it was to be approved today through council, through the 2 motions here, we would basically start moving forward with the MOU, which would then be sent off to BC Transit this year, as well as engagement with the public. And then next year, BC Transit would go forward in the spring of 2024 to request the provincial grant funding. Then if that is approved, then they would proceed with implementation. And then as mentioned before, the operation would be around like the end of 2024 into 2025.
Yeah, follow up and just well spotted. I didn't notice Chelsea is joining us online, so from BC Transit. So she has her hand up. Maybe we'll just, sorry, Councillor Betts, we'll just hear from Chelsea first. Go ahead, Chelsea.
Sure, thanks. Through the chair, I'll just add a couple more things to that. So right now, this is being, both of these expansions, if approved by Summerland Council, are currently planned for September 2024. Of course, with the Route 32, we are looking to do some public engagement to get an understanding of the exact routing and things. So we would need to be our public engagement would need to be complete in order to meet that timeline, but that's what we're currently planning for. And as well, we will be looking to the province to secure their share of funding in the fall of this year. So we will find out by budget day in February 2024 whether provincial funding is available for these expansions. So once we have confirmation of provincial funding and bus availability in early 2024, we would then be able to start proceeding with planning for these expansions should Summerland Council approve and sign the MOU.
Councillor Betts.
Thank you so much for that. Just as a follow-up to my question about the expansion and just more detail on the requirement for an additional bus, just as I'm new to this file, would Summerland be responsible for that capital investment, or is that part of what the BC government comes forward with? And can you elaborate on that, please?
Yeah, of course. So BC Transit owns the provincial fleet of buses, and we then lease these buses to our local government partners. So the costs that you see there reflect the lease fees necessary for these expansions. So the costs do factor in the buses that you would be leasing from us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Trainer and then Peak.
Odessa or Chelsea, do we have any data on the first 3 months of the fee, like the free transit? So I guess like May, June, July, were there more people riding the bus, do you know, in Summerland?
Through the chair, Odessa.
Oh, sorry, I'll divert it to you, Chelsea, in a second here. Through the chair. So anecdotally, we have heard that there is an increase. However, I have requested from Chelsea at BC Transit that she provide any numbers on her end. So if she can probably answer if there are any ready to present today. If not, they can be presented later.
Yeah, through the chair, I'll just basically echo what Odessa said. We know from the data that average daily boardings on the Route 30 are up this calendar year significantly when compared to 2022. However, breaking it down to the exact months is still something that our data analysis team is in the process of doing, and also then further trying to get data on how many of those rides were free rides. So as soon as we have that available, I'll provide it to staff.
Thank you. Councillor Peak.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't know who would answer this, but on you're going to do a further consultation for Route 32. And I'm wondering, in that consultation, would you be looking to the kind of support for how often that route might be provided from the lower town and Trout Creek up to the downtown area? And is it possible to do that with small buses as opposed to large buses? So yeah, two main questions.
Thank you.
Through the chair, I'll let Chelsea answer that. Unfortunately, I don't have the direct answer to that.
Okay.
Through the chair, thank you. So this expansion initiative planned for the Route 32 consists of 1,000 annual service hours. So exactly how those are scheduled throughout the day, how much is put into the schedule for Monday to Friday, how much is put in for Saturdays, the length of the service day, all of those types of things we can ask questions about during the public consultation phase. But just for your awareness, there is 1,000 hours being planned for this. So that's kind of the confines that we're working within. And then Oh, my apologies. I know you had one more part of the question and I've lost it.
Whether it could be done with small buses like the handy duck, because I wouldn't suggest it'd be a lot of people.
My apologies. It is a light duty bus that's currently serving the Route 30. So the same type of bus as is used for Handy Dart service, and it would be that same size bus used for the Route 32.
Councillor Barkwald and Betts.
So this bus service would be more than twice the hours for the Penticton route and cost 70, our share of it would be $73,000 for a full year's worth of service if we charged, I was going to say admission, but whatever the term is. That would mean a 0.75% tax increase to the roughly speaking, to the taxpayers of Summerland. Do we have any idea of that's a big lump all at once, of the demand for this kind of service? How many riders will we have? How much is it going to cost us per ride?
Through the chair. So I don't have any specific numbers, and I don't know if Chelsea would either on her end, but these two recommendations are based off of the surveys that were put out in previous years to gauge the current users and possible future needs of residents. So these two are based off of user comments from the survey stating that, there's issues or gaps in service, that they would appreciate some sort of connection. In a more detailed report, it goes into a bit more detail in the attached document, but there's also just the survey itself has provided that justification for it. Chelsea, I don't know if you have specific numbers at the top of your head with regards to expected ridership, but I think it's expected that this would fill a gap where we currently don't have any service in the district.
Yeah, through the chair. No, we don't have any anticipated ridership numbers or anticipated cost per ride. As Odessa outlined, these initiatives were both strongly supported through the Transit Future Action Plan, which we presented on a few months back, and it did involve multiple rounds of public engagement ranging from in-person to targeted mail-outs in Summerland. So through those, we understand there's a need, but in terms of more specifics from there, it would yet to be determined.
Councillor Betts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is that, so how do we evaluate the success of the rollout? Say we move forward with Route 32 and ultimately discover after a year that we're not really getting many riders using it as we had hoped. Are we able to cancel or change the program from that point if we decide as the district it's not rolling out as we expected?
Through the chair, I'll let Chelsea respond to that question. Through the chair, you as the local government partner have control of your service levels. So if this was something that in the future you deemed to be in need of change, then that's certainly something that we could work with you on, whether that's optimization of schedules or a service reduction, if that is what it came to. It's the jurisdiction of the local government partner to have control of service levels.
I guess CIO.
Thank you, Your Worship. And maybe just an additional point of clarity. I think if we do get into a Route 32 example, we would be committed to at least a year, if I recall, for the initial 12 months of the lease of that bus. Is that correct, Chelsea? So no less than 12 months.
That's true. If through the chair, if there was a scenario, and I do believe that you have to give a route more than 1 year to determine its success, because routes definitely take multiple years to grow in maturity. But we do say in the memorandum of understanding that you will be charged the lease fee for a year if anything were to change. However, we would do our best if that was what Summerland Council asked of us to find a new home for that bus and have a different local government take on the lease fee. We would certainly work with you on that to make that happen as quickly as possible.
I think it might be helpful if we could get kind of numbers from other communities like Osoyoos. They have a local a service as well as their regional service, and just to see what kind of numbers they have. might give us some kind of indication, because right now we kind of sitting here having no idea what kind of numbers, what should we expect? I don't know. I think Councillor Peak and then Councillor Barkwell.
If there's to be a second outreach, would that be the point that would trigger whether in looking at that outreach, the council would then say, yes, we'd like to try this? Because when you say it's 1,000 hours, I'm not sure that distribution, like if you have a bus that goes to those areas, do you need it like in the morning, midday, and then returning people from that area back down to those areas? So is it just that type of service? I'm not quite, I don't have enough answers on this, and I am concerned with the funds.
Councillor Barkwell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My sort of question was similar to Councillor Peaks, in that, couldn't we maybe start off with reduced hours? Or could it be the Penticton bus just sort of does a route through town on its way to Penticton, and instead of a separate bus circulating around town for 1,000 hours a year, when the main principal bus between Summerland and Penticton is only 450 hours a year? There's just, that's just too much to go to the taxpayers with, as far as I can see. Yeah.
I think it's more than 450 a year. That's just the additional Sunday service. But Odessa.
Through the chair, so I'll do my best to answer this, and then I'll let Chelsea fill in any gaps that I don't have the answer to. But for Councillor Peak's question there on hours, so this is a full year. That's annual hours, 1,000 hours across 12 months. So if we're looking here at Sunday service at 450 hours, we can kind of get a sense as to how that's going to play out for kind of each day throughout the month. And again, as mentioned in the engagement, that is our opportunity to see how often we might need it on specific days throughout the week, because it is Monday to Saturday at this point. So it doesn't include Sunday service hours for the Route 32. And for Councillor Barkwell's question there, oh, now I can't remember what his question was. I apologize. I completely blanked. Do you remember your question? Yes, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for that. I appreciate that reminder. You get so lost in your train of thought there. So Route 30, you can extend or you can add stops in there. However, as per discussions with BC Transit, you can only add stops so long as it doesn't impact the total turnaround time for that. So if we were to go and do a kind of local route with Route 30 and include it in there, it would definitely increase the amount of time it would take for that existing route to be completed, which would disrupt the rest of the stops for Route 30. So that is why a Route 32 is recommended, because it would service a completely different area of Summerland that is currently disconnected from Route 30, but in of itself would require specific hours and routing that's currently not being met. And yes, the cost is there reflected. So at this point, the 2024 budget would be just for a third of that cost, and then the preceding years would be for that full cost at this point.
Councillor Trainer.
Is there any value in waiting until our year of free ridership is done on Route 30? The whole, at least from my perspective, one of the reasons that I supported that is because we've had Route 30 in place for a long time, but we really wanted to boost the numbers. Like we just weren't seeing big increases. And so that's why I was really supportive of that, to kind of get people used to taking the bus. So I almost want to see if that worked, like if more people are actually using the bus before we add another route. I mean, I'm also conflicted because I know if you add a route, then people will start using it, so which one do you do first? But is there, Odessa, in your opinion, is there any value in waiting a year to see if we are getting more numbers?
Through the chair. So yes, there is an option. So at this point in time, we can wait until next year to come back to BC Transit and request that as part of their TIPS program, which is their service extension program, to include it for a 2025 to 2026 calendar year. So we don't have to do it this year if council so chooses and wants to wait to see those results. So there is an option to come back next year.
Thank you, Councillor Van Alphen.
Thank you through the mayor to Odessa. Just maybe thinking outside the box here a bit, but the Sunday service possibility. Has this discussion been had with the City of Penticton Council? Like it's kind of a win-win, right? It's a win for them if we're sending our residents to Penticton, and if their residents can come this way, like should this not be a shared cost?
Through the chair. So because the Route 30 is a regional route, those regional partners, which includes Penticton, RDOS, and the District of Summerland, and I believe Princeton as well, or it might be for the other route. No, it is just the other route there. So yes, it is a shared cost service, but because we are kind of the primary route holder, this is coming to us here for Route 30. And yes, the added Sunday service would definitely be a benefit for everyone on that particular route in itself.
Could we get clarification on that? Because my understanding was Route 30 is totally funded by ourselves and nobody else contributes to it.
Maybe I could add to that. The Route 30 is 100% funded by the District of Summerland. If you wanted to have a conversation with the City of Penticton or the Regional District of Okanagan-Similkameen, that would certainly be something that the District of Summerland could look into doing. I think it would likely be more, there's more of a precedent for that conversation to happen with the RDOS than the City of Penticton, since it is the RDOS that has responsibility for example, the Route 40 Osoyoos Penticton. But as a local government, you could have conversations about cost sharing with any local government. And I'll just add as well, just back to the previous questions and conversation. Currently, your annual operating agreement for the Route 30 has 4,800 hours. So there's 4,800 hours annually of service between Penticton and Summerland on the Route 30. And that's 5 trips per weekday. And then just a couple less than that. I don't have the exact number for Saturdays. So you can just understand that just gives you a bit of scale for the 1,000 hours. That is introductory level service. It would just be a couple round trips per day, recognizing it would be a shorter trip time. You're not going to and from another community, but that is quite a low level of service already. It is what we consider introductory level service for a new route.
Councillor Mark will follow up, or were you?
Yeah, I was just going to add 2 things I wanted to say, and I forgot the second one, but I'm glad. Thanks for the clarification on the hours of service. That makes more sense. But if you're looking at it as in thinking in your head that, well, we could give it a try and test the ridership, and if it's really poor, then maybe cancel the service. But from a political point of view, once you introduce that service, and even if there's like one person every other day on that bus, it will be politically difficult to cancel something that's there already. It'll be, no matter how poor the ridership is, it might raise quite a hue and a cry.
Councillor Betts.
Thank you for the opportunity. I think it's really an interesting route, the Route 32, in that I feel that we could access our youth who are doing post-secondary in Penticton, who currently don't have a way. I mean, if you live in Lower Town, our students have to get cars. So because there's no route taking them there. And I see that opportunity to link in. But I do think for the time being that I'm with Deputy Mayor Trainer thinking that let's see how that 1 year of free service can go and then launch into this additional service, this opportunity, be like, okay, we did this 1 year, we got people engaged, and now we're stepping forward into this next opportunity. And I mean, thinking to launch potentially, say if you look at say September of 2025 of the next year, or however the timing works out, to think about the start of the post-secondary school year and what kind of opportunities. It's not only employees that are going to Penticton. We want employees to stay in Summerland and have opportunities to work in Summerland. But I don't know. I just like the opportunity to kind of see some results before adding another expenditure when we've already committed to spending for the free transit. So that's kind of where I'm falling on that.
Thank you, Councillor Peak.
Yes, I don't support Route 32 for Sundays at this point. I'd like to see the results of our free service for a full year and we come back to it and look at it again after the fact. And I still have some trouble around the Route 32, although I support it. So if my question perhaps to Chelsea is, so the 450 hours is only two trips a day to all these Lower Town and Trout Creek areas on Route 32?
Through the chair. So the annual service hours that are being proposed for the new Route 32, so I'm just getting back to make sure I'm providing you with the right information here, is 1,000 service hours for the new Route 32. Exactly how many trips per day that is able to provide would be determined by the exact routing that's established. So I can't predict yet how many trips that would be per day. I was just saying for context that there was about 4,800 annual service hours right now for the Route 30. And that is also provided 6 days a week, which is what we'd be looking to provide on the Route 32. And that's about 5 round trips per day. And that's, almost 5 times the amount of service hours.
Councillor Peak.
So the primary cost in the 76,000 or whatever it is proportionally more of the actual cost of the bus than the cost of the service hours? Just trying to figure this out.
It would be both. But if you'd like a breakdown of what the lease fees are, that is certainly something I could provide to staff following this meeting of how much of that cost is made up of the 2 vehicle lease fees.
So I'm sensing we're some discomfort here introducing this either of these routes right now. I think one question I have is, we have this free fare trial going on right now. If all of a sudden we introduce a local fare and we're charging for that, fees for that, how does that, how do we communicate that you can ride for free to Penticton, but you can't ride for free around town? That I think that's going to create a lot of confusion. I think I would suggest if we could defer this for a year and come back to us in a year. And if we could, I really feel we need a bit more information how all this is going to, what's it going to look like? What's a local route really going to look like? What different scenarios might play out? What can we expect in ridership, or what should we expect? Maybe by looking at other communities. I'm not really comfortable making a decision right now. I don't think we have the information to do it. And I don't know if the timing is right, as other councillors have said. And I would prefer to wait to see how our free trial plays out. That's just my comments.
Mr. Mayor,
Councillor Patton.
Thank you. I agree wholeheartedly with that approach. I think what we've asked of our citizens in regards to the free service, and if I may be mistaken, but I believe it was around $40,000. And we're asking our citizens for a lot again this year, and especially as we move into what we're moving into in our referendum for our recreation center. And I think for us to now ask for additional $100,000 for the 2 routes, I think that that is a huge ask. And I think that you're absolutely correct. We either table this or we just accept this report for information. And once the free service is completed, then we look at it again in a direction that we may want to go. But I wholeheartedly agree with the decision to not proceed with this.
Okay. Anyone? Sure, if you want to bring forward a motion.
First of all, thank you, Odessa and Chelsea, for bringing this report forward and for answering our questions as best you could with the information you have. But I will make a motion that this be deferred until the conclusion of the free transit fare pilot project, which would be next April. Yeah, and then we can look at it again.
Second, any discussion on the motion? Councillor Barkwell?
The motion as it reads, does it make it clear that we're deferring the decision, not that we're going to defer the implementation? Because it's just basically saying that council proceed with the creation that it be deferred. So this creation is being deferred, not the decision to consider it.
I see it as we're deferring the consideration of the motion.
Consideration of the motion. Okay, I didn't read that first part. That's right. Okay.
If I may, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, Councillor.
Just for clarity for me, so if we defer in regards to this, in a year or after next Earth Day, these chances are that these dollar values are not going to be relevant anymore. So would we not better off just to accept this as information, and then if we decide to move forward, then a new recommendation or can come back from staff or come to us from staff?
I think they would come back anyways, but I'll refer to the corporate officer for comment on that.
Thanks, Mayor Holmes. So council can do whatever they'd like. So if that's the route they'd want to go, I'd recommend just defeating this as it's already been moved and seconded, and then they can just bring forward a motion to receive.
But if they come back with different information a year from now, there's nothing we can do about it. Councilor Trainer.
The intent of my motion was to say that we're still interested in this, and we would just like to wait until we have more information next April to continue the discussion. I'm sure the numbers will change.
Through the mayor to Councilor.
If I may, so if that would be the case, would we not be better off just to accept it as information? We're still, no matter what happens, staff is still going to have to come forward with a whole new plan based on dollars, and the basis for the Route 30 and 32 would be there, but everything else would be reviewed. So I'm thinking that we just table it. Or I'm sorry, not table it, but we accept the report for information, or defeat it as our corporate officer said, and then just receive it as information.
I guess from my perspective, if we just receive for information, that implies we're not interested in pursuing it further. If we defer it until next year, it means, yeah, we are interested, but just not right now. To me, that's how I interpret the difference. Councillor Peak, did you have something?
I think we just proceed with this motion. I see that as the opportunity we would consider, and we'd look at it after the free transit period.
Okay, anybody else? I'll call the question then. All in favor? Any opposed? Councillor Patton?
No, I'm good. I'll go with the flow.
Okay, so none opposed. That carries. Thank you very much, Odessa and Chelsea. No bylaws for adoption, no items removed from a consent agenda, public comment period. Don't see any public. And so I'll need a resolution to close the meeting to the public or pursuant to sections 91 A, E, and G of the Community Charter. Councillor Van Elfen, Councillor Barkwell, all in favor? And that carries.
Mr. Mayor, I am going to sign off as I am going to leave Vernon and drive back to Summerland for